Kill Bill 1 and 2 combined make a epic 4-hour revenge story where the protagonist, Beatrix Kiddo, is attempting to hunt down and murder Bill, her ex, but not before she takes revenge on every assassin that was involved in the assassination at her wedding. Um, the first film, which is 2 hours long, is basically non-stop bloodthirsty violent action, and then the first hour of the second film is basically the same thing with a few more conversations, but basically still extremely violent up until the last hour, which involves Beatrix going to finally confront Bill, and then we're treated to about 40 minutes of this domestic chit chat in a lounge room before the final confrontation takes place, or the final physical confrontation takes place, which is like a 30-second fight in the backyard. So what's this about? Why is the climax of this series a conversation? It's it's classic Tarantino in that in between violence there's conversation about seemingly mundane things, but this is the final confrontation, this chat. It's not the fight at the end where Beatrix wins, because Beatrix sort of needs to win. Even if you give the audience the happy ending at the end of the film, as I don't know, we've seen in other films, like I talked about The Player in a previous video, and they make a big point that every big film you need to have a happy ending, and they almost make a mockery of it, where the happy ending is almost this dark, twisted happy ending where it is happy, it makes you feel good, but it sort of means all the bad things have happened in the film. And while Beatrix winning is not twisted, like there's no badness or sour taste in her victory, it often overshadows I guess the impact of this chat, and then people might think, oh, it was weird, like there was some sort of Tarantino chat for about half an hour, but then like Beatrix ultimately won, so she's the best, or that's what it's all about. Like it's all about Beatrix and Bill, and ultimately Beatrix wins, and that's all that matters. But I think that would be overlooking the importance of this chat, which it goes for like half an hour. Why would this be in here unless it was critical? And how I see it is that this is basically a self-insert for Tarantino to act as Bill, where he lectures Beatrix, who's standing for the audience, about her own nature and what she will and will not admit to herself. And I think as an audience member, when you're itching to see what happens in the film, you want to see Beatrix get her comeuppance. It does reveal a lot about you, that what Bill is saying to Beatrix is, and he has the truth serum. It's almost like this scene is the truth serum for the audience, where you have to confront who you are and like what are those dark instincts inside you. But most people probably don't do that. They probably just blank out and wait for the end of the film where Beatrix wins. But anyway, Beatrix rolls up to the house and she's just expecting to see Bill and not. So she's surprised when she sees her daughter, and Bill and the daughter are playing some kind of pretend gunfight, and they fall down when Beatrix walks in, like as if Beatrix pretended to shoot them, and then the daughter gets up and shoots Beatrix with the toy gun, bang bang, and she falls down as well. And what this is doing is it's showing the audience that while yes, we've seen 1.5 movies of ultra violence, it is just a play. It's not real. They're just movies. Just like the family having the little pretend fight is fake. It's just a bit of play. And then following this, Bill is preparing some food, and he's talking about to to Beatrix about their daughter and the fish incident, how she killed the fish, and talking about, I guess, the child's violent nature, but doing it in a very fatherly way. Like it, I've heard it described as creepy because Bill's the villain, but it's almost what the movie's doing is it's in this moment it's using this lesson of how, as an audience, we've enjoyed 1.5 movies of pure violence to tell us that violence is part of our nature, and it's not all of a sudden we're out of this violent movie and into this home domestic situation. It's like, yes, so you killed the fish and you're violent, but it's okay. You just got to be aware of these feelings, like things like that. And then they put the daughter to bed. Beatrix watches a movie with her daughter. Again, another movie, and then Beatrix walks downstairs, and Bill's sitting out there, and there's a western on the TV, a western film, which is another reminder that we're watching a film. There's been 2 films, a play fight. This is just a film. That's what the message is trying to get across. Like, none of this is real. This is a movie. um, then Bill starts kind of lecturing Beatrix and trying to have a conversation. And I think at this point, audiences have seen a lot of Tarantino films, and a lot of times there are these extended conversations, and sometimes when you're watching them, you just want to get back to the action, which is what Beatrix does as she launches herself towards the samurai sword above the TV, and Bill shoots her back, and then he says, "I'm just fucking with you," which is like Tarantino saying to the audience that he is just messing with them. He knows that they want to see blood, they want to see violence. He's just primed them up with 1.5 movies of pure violence. We're at the final showdown. The audience is expecting this is going to be some epic fight, like the crazy '88 fight at the end of Kill Bill 1. And then Bill basically gets Beatrix to sit back down and says that he wants her to tell the truth before they hit the bloody climax, which is, again, what the audience is waiting for, the bloody climax. But first, Tarantino, through Bill, is going to tell the audience what he thinks of them. So Bill says, when it comes to the subject of me being violence in films, or Tarantino, I believe you are utterly incapable of telling the truth to me and least of all to yourself, which I interpret as he's saying people can't admit that they love violence, or that they just want to get to the bloodthirsty action, or the bloody climax. And then Bill goes on about Superman, and he starts going on about it, and then Beatrix says, how long does this shit take to go into effect, which is after she's been shot with the truth serum. And this is sort of like the audience cutting Tarantino off again, saying, like, I just want to get to the end. Like, I don't want to hear all this stuff about, the inner self and violence and violent nature of humans. Like, I just want the violence. It's like the impatience of the audience coming out through Beatrix here. And Bill says, about 2 minutes, just long enough for me to finish my point, which is saying, like, I understand that you want to get to the end, but it's my movie. I'm here to make a point. Bill goes on to talk about Superman and his alter ego being Clark Kent, his view of the human race. The characteristics of Clark Kent are that he's weak, he's unsure of himself, and he's a coward. And then says that's a bit like Beatrix going with Tommy Plimpton, who was the man she was going to marry before the start of the first film. And then he says, you'd have worn the costume, but you were still Beatrix Kiddo. And every morning when you woke up, you'd still be Beatrix. And she sort of rebuts that, and or she says, you're calling me a liar. And he says, I'm calling you a natural born killer. You're trying to disguise yourself as a worker bee, but you're a killer. Or words to that effect. And there's a couple of things here. It's sort of like everyone in the audience who says that they just want a normal life, but perhaps, from an evolutionary point of view, like we do have that killer instinct inside of us, or at least some of us. It's hard to tell if the point is that everyone has that and everyone is playing the role of just being a worker bee and satisfied with a normal life, or that it's just a select few people, maybe the people that love these films, that within them a normal life is boring, and that they perhaps resent the fact that they have to live in this 9 to 5 like domestic family life potentially. And then ultimately he asks, do you think your life in El Paso was going to work? And she says no. And all those people you killed to get to me, it felt good, didn't it? Yes. Every single one of them, yes. Which is, you enjoyed watching all those people die in the audience. Like, people loved Kill Bill 1, and it's hundreds of people are murdered, and it's enjoyable to watch, and that's what he's saying. And that you think you cut out for this regular domestic life, but deep down, you want some more adventure or some more danger. And part of that is this setting they're in a lounge room. Um, we've just been on a bit of a globe-trotting journey uh, for a quest for revenge. It's pretty epic. Beatrix has been sitting on a plane with a samurai sword in this story, and now she's reduced to sitting on a couch and getting lectured by Bill. And I think if you think of Beatrix as the audience, it's like, in your regular lives, this is what you say that you really want, is this domestic life where, maybe you can play pretend at adventure, but what you really deep down crave is that adventure. And it's almost like the fact that, I don't know, maybe this isn't accurate, but I think Kill Bill 1 is slightly more revered than Kill Bill 2, and I think part of it is this ending. It's that this ending is, on the surface level, very flat, and it doesn't live up to a lot of the rest of the two films. But the point is that it's making a point by being flat and domesticated, that, hey, as a real person who's watching this, like, this is what you say you want your life to be, but I've just shown you two films worth of what your life could be, or maybe what your ancestors' life was a little bit more like, a bit more dangerous, and you loved it. And now that we're not doing that, you're sort of feeling a bit flat or a bit impatient that we're not getting to the bloody climax. It's, you don't want to be sitting here and listening to tales about Superman and Clark Kent. You're out for blood. And I think that's the whole point of this final scene. It really does seem like a big self-insert from Tarantino, but it is more satisfying, I think, seeing it this way, instead of just seeing it as, this character of Bill, who we've really only seen a little bit of up until this point, just going on some random monologue. Like, I think the whole thesis of the two movies comes down to this scene where he's lecturing the audience on who they are deep down inside, and that they perhaps don't want to admit it to themselves. And then after this, there's a bit of a cutaway scene where Beatrix finds out she's pregnant, and an assassin is sent to kill her, but they have an extended conversation about her being pregnant, and that they can just go their separate ways. And then there's this idea of, like, their child having a clean slate, and Beatrix sort of says, I wanted the child to have a clean slate. That wouldn't have been possible around you. And I think there's some questions there around, do any of us get a clean slate? Because most of us who are watching this movie have not led a violent life, but there's still that psychological thing that we have inside us that is drawn to it. And where does that come from? It's not an accident that films like this are successful. They're playing on very baseline human drives. So whether Beatrix's daughter, or us, or our children get a clean slate, even if the bill, like the perhaps the tainted person that Beatrix doesn't want around, even if he's not physically around, genetically he still is around and still lives within all of us, really. And then right at the end, or right before the fight, that Bill is talking about shooting Beatrix, and he asks, "Was what I did really that surprising?" Beatrix says, "Yes, it was. Could you do what you did? Of course you could, but I never thought you would or could do that to me." And then Bill says, "I'm really sorry, kiddo, but you thought wrong." And I really think this is a little bit about, it could be movies themselves or just authority in general, or people that we trust to be in authority. And she's saying, like, of course you could, but I never thought you would. Like, that, could a movie trick you into believing something, or try and hypnotize you into believing something without you realizing? Like, of course, they could, but it's almost like there's this trust that we have in movies or in authority that at the end of the day they're going to have our best interests at heart, or look out for us. And I think in this moment, Bill's, and it's interesting this use of Kiddo as Beatrix's surname, but I'm really sorry, kiddo, but you thought wrong. Like, that's almost straight to the audience. Like, it's almost like watching films in itself is a childish thing to do, because it's like, as a child you have bedtime stories, and this idea that stories are this way to get the common person to understand topics. And there's the potentially psychopaths or sociopaths, or at least very talented writers who are skilled enough to deliver stories that play on elements of the human psychology. And that is almost an evolution up from someone who's merely an enjoyer of films, because they're able to convey ideas to the audience that they perhaps don't even know about themselves, like the violence. Like, he's laughing at Beatrix, like, you can't admit it to yourself that you really love me, but which I think is him saying to the audience that you can't admit to yourself that you love violent films or violence itself. And yeah, the use of kiddo, like, it's saying you may, if you're watching this film, you may be an adult, but really, unless you really understand the nature of film, or the nature of authority around you, like, you really are kind of a kid. Which was just an interesting thing to say before the final fight. But anyway, then they fight and it's over in a minute. There's hardly any blood. I think Bill spits a little bit of blood out, but um, again, it's not really the point of the scene. It's about Bill sitting up on his high chair there, talking down to Beatrix in the audience, giving them a lecture that they're probably too distracted and impatient to really hear. Um, but yeah, an interesting scene nonetheless.